So just to let everyone that's watching um, know, me and Sarah have been friends for
Don't
a
know.
while. I think I think it's about 5 or 6 years. So we met when we were traveling, um, and we've been besties ever since, haven't we?
Yes, little soul sisters.
Yeah, and it's funny because our journeys were so different back then,
Mm.
and we've kind of just grown and got into all the stuff that we're into together but apart, um, which has created this beautiful bond between the two of us. And
Lovely.
well, we recently found out that we're both manifestors in human design as well, which is even more weird because there's only, I think it's 8 or 9% of the population which are manifestors. And if you don't know much about human design, then I'll actually post in the comments a couple of Instagram pages for you to follow. There's also I think it's called myhumandesign.com, and there's another one called justhumandesign.com maybe, where you can get your chart. But yeah, it's really, really expensive. I'm not going to go into details about it, but if you want to learn more about your human design, then go and have a look at it because it's just so amazing. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the spiral. And I think what I'm going to first ask you is why you first decided to do
I decided to do it because you talked about it so
it.
much when you were doing it. And I was like, oh, this feels a little bit deep for me.
Mm.
And then you did your practitioner training, and then you were telling me more about it. And then I did Rise. And then after I did Rise, well, actually, at the very beginning of Rise, I was like, I'm doing Spiral. And then you were like, I knew you would.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
And I think it's one of those things that you have to do when it's the right time.
was it
You have to.
was it a year or more after you had done it?
No, it wasn't even that, because it's only been a year since it's only just been over a year since I did my first one. So it must have been about 6 months, I think, because I think I did my second. Yeah, I did my second one 6 months after.
Wow, that seems a lot longer. Yeah, so that is basically why I did it, because I thought when you were in it, obviously there was them deep dark periods, and then when you came out of it, you were like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I was still a bit like, not really sure. And then when you were telling me more about it, I was like, oh my god, I have to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially after Rise, because Rise was so amazing. I just didn't want like that inner work to end. I just wanted to keep going.
yeah. You just had that urge to just carry on evolving and expanding.
And
Yeah,
it kept me in a meditation to say, like, my angels, my little drop-in said, like, spiral. It's what you need
yeah.
to do.
Yay. And that's why I feel like it's so important to reiterate that when I've had this so many times with working with like mentors or doing like programs where I'll have like that calling, and it's like my soul wants to do it and I'm like, yes, I really want to do it, but then I'm like, no, like I don't have enough money, or there's always like excuses, and you just want to stay small, and that's just your small self trying to keep you small. And so I think it's so important to
Yeah,
reiterate that, to go with the calling,
yeah.
because that your intuition is telling you to do the thing, and the other side of that resistance and that uncomfortable period is something that's so much more expansive and normally unimaginable. Don't you find when you do, like, especially like with something like the spiral, you set your intentions and then by the end of it it's like, whoa, I've actually received so much more than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, because you never think. There's always a small part of you that thinks, am I really, like, going to achieve what I want to achieve?
Mm.
But that's fear again, isn't it? That's your head taking over instead of listening to your gut.
Yeah,
Um, but then at the end, you're like, wow. I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
is this happening?
What is this magic? I'm just going to have a look to see if anyone's watching, and I know it's a bit of a funny time, because I know a lot of people are at work, but if anyone does have any questions, then just post them below and we'll just get to you at the end of the call. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm not really much of a planner, so yeah. Okay, so I want you to talk a little bit. Do you remember your intentions for the spiral? Do you remember what you?
I don't actually. I don't, but I have. This is so interesting that I have my book in front of me.
Of course you do.
Divine timing. When did we start?
You did yours in.
Was it September?
So I did July, August. Yeah, I think it must have been around August, September.
I could be reading in here forever trying to find what my intentions were, but I'm pretty sure. Oh, here we are. Spiral. A thriving business. Yay. Leaving my job.
Mm-hmm.
I set the intention to have an easeful journey throughout the next 8 weeks. Opening my heart.
Our favorite saying. Me and Sarah have this joke. We've been saying it for such a long time now that we just say it as a joke now all the time. The affirmation of "I open my heart to receiving love."
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was probably those were all of my intentions, but I suppose the intention of a thriving business, behind that came you telling me to hand my notes in.
Yeah.
So that's my intention, but that's what happened.
Yeah. So just talk a little bit about like your journey throughout the spiral.
So the first week I did not have a good time. I didn't enjoy it. I knew at some point that I would find parts difficult, but I thought it would be a lot more to do with my sacral chakra, but it was actually all to do with my root chakra. And that first week, I didn't want to carry on. And I remember being with Ella, our other friend, Ella, because she came up for the weekend and we climbed Snowdon, which was just an experience.
I remember that.
Again, it was awful. It was so wet and windy. Oh, it was like a never-ending journey, but I'm proud that we did it. But when we were driving back, this was the end of the first week because it was on the weekend. We were listening to a song and I just burst out crying, and I was just crying and crying and crying, and I was just like, what is going on? And then we came home and like had some food and I was all right. And then the next day we went out, and I just had this like sensation of like this deep darkness that I'd never felt before. And I was just like, what is the point? Like, what are we doing? What's going on? And then I remember saying to Ella, we were in a bar and I was crying. And then Ella started crying because I was crying. And I was like, what is going on? So we just got a taxi home. And then I remember speaking to you and I was like, I just don't want to do this. And obviously you were really supportive and you were like, you know, if you don't want to carry on with me, you should carry on with someone else. And obviously I would never do this with anybody else, but you. But yeah, that first week I really didn't want to carry on. And a few of my friends were like, oh my God, I just don't think this is good for you.
It's so normal though, especially around levels 1 and 2, because we're clearing like really deep rooted and low vibrational. So like especially the first level is shame, guilt and dogma, which is like really low vibrational emotions. So it's so normal to have a bit of a hard time. You know, and that's one thing that I love about the spiral. So I love it. It's like it's a gift and a curse all at the same time, because you have no choice but to look at your shit when you're doing it. And it's in, you know, looking at your stuff that you can alchemize it and shift and like so rapidly. And I remember myself going through the spiral the first time, and I can't actually remember what I was like with the root chakra, but I know that throughout it I was,
You got higher up, it was like more
yeah,
like that place of like, what is happening?
yeah, I had a massive ego death.
Yeah.
And I remember having like really bad social anxiety, and I had I remember having a panic attack once because I couldn't be around people. I was just like, oh my God, I can't be around people because I don't know who I am. And I don't know how to like interact with other people. But what I'm noticing actually is everyone's journey is so, so different. Like, I've taken, I think, 15 people through, and it's just some people who just find it so easeful. Other people are just like on a high the whole time. Other people have that their normal, like, up and down, which is totally normal. And even though people's transformations are so different, I think the one underlying thing that just runs through all of my client transformations is that self-love and that acceptance. But I think that's also because that's my transmission in the world. Is a big part of my work is about teaching you how to be with your emotions and how to move through emotions and how to just love and accept yourself there and be with your inner child. So I think having that alongside doing the spiral is super, super important, to have that ability to just be there for yourself and not make,
Not to judge yourself, I suppose.
yeah, exactly, yeah, and not make it anything about how worthy you are or how ungood enough you are, or you know um so yeah, it can be rocky, but I just want you to explain, yeah, a little bit about the rest of your journey,
Rest
if
of
you
my
can
journey,
remember.
yeah, I don't ever think anything was as bad as that first week.
Mm,
I think after that it was, well, not that I can remember, even though it wasn't that long ago. Um, I think every other week was pretty, like, it wasn't that bad. I think because the first week was so bad, there was nothing worse after that.
yeah,
Um, where I think when I got to level 7, I was a bit like, what is this? Like, does it even work? Which is just
yeah,
the thing, isn't it?
I had that.
Yeah, like, what am I doing? Like, I've just wasted my time. And then again, I'd stop myself and be like, no, you haven't wasted your time. Like, this is just your inner child. And then I'd be like, it's okay.
Yeah,
Have lots of love. So yeah, I loved it. And when it was over, I was like, oh, like, I don't want it to be over.
yeah, everyone says that. I don't think
Yeah,
I've had one client that's gone through the spiral that hasn't said, and that's why I've extended it to 3 months, because I feel like people just want to carry it on. Not that you
yeah,
can, like, not to obviously do the spiral again, but just to have more support and that accountability every week to,
yeah.
kick people's asses and make sure they're doing doing the things.
You do it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's another thing as well. It's just having someone there to support you throughout your journey is just so, so important. And you obviously have to do like your integration tasks between the spiral. So when you're doing the spiral, you go through the levels and you also get integration tasks in between your sessions to make sure that you're integrating each theme and each level. So sometimes it's journaling, sometimes it's meditation, it could be like self-pleasure, going for a walk out in nature, it could be doing a workout. There's so many different things, and I tend to set it based on what people are journeying through and what's coming up for them. Um,
I love the
and
integration tasks, even
yeah,
though week it would be like the day before and it'd be like, oh, I haven't done my time.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, is having that support, having someone there to be like, this is what you need to do, and you have to do it, because if you don't do it by next week, I'll be like, why the fuck haven't you done your integration tasks? um so it's just having someone there to keep you accountable for working towards your intentions and what you want to achieve, or what you want to grow into, or whatever. um so how was your talk a little bit about your journey after the spiral. So you obviously handed your notice in
Yeah, so I
halfway
had to,
through.
which took me ages to do as well, even though that was part of my I think that was part of week 2, and I was like, what? It's only week 2.
Yeah.
But that took me a long time to hand in, but I eventually did it. And then afterwards, I probably didn't. It's funny because when you finish, you think, oh, like my whole life's changed now, but you don't really notice things until they start to like creep up, if that makes any sense. So, for example, when I did the self-love challenge with you at the beginning of January, and normally the issues would be about the way that I looked, or, you know, my exterior, and it was nothing to do with my physical appearance. And for me, that was huge, because that was one of the things in Spiral that I just really wanted to learn to like love me, like for me, and not for the way that I look, because it really doesn't matter the way that I look. But I had such, I don't know, I've always had this opinion about myself: you're this, you're that. And it might come across to everybody that, you know, I'm very confident and I like to get dressed up and go out. But on the inside, most of the time when I'd be going out and get dressed up, I'd be like, oh God, like that anxiety inside you. But nobody ever sees that. So for me, that was huge to then realize that, like, I don't care. Like, I love like me for who I am. And like, we should love our bodies for what they are, because they are amazing. Like, they do amazing things every single day. So why do we pick on ourselves so much? So that was huge. And like my whole thing, like the last 2 weeks, I cannot stop eating. I'm so hungry all the time. We've talked about this. I'm not like, oh my God, I'm going to get fat if I'm eating all this food. But that hasn't even entered my head, because all I'm thinking is, I'm starving. I need to eat the food. So like, I'm not thinking anything like that. Whereas before Spiral, I literally would have been like, no, Sarah, like, even if you're hungry, you can't eat that because you'll get fat. But now I'm like, my body is obviously hungry because I'm moving a lot. So just eat the food if you're hungry.
Yeah. And that's huge, isn't it?
It's
That's
huge.
just that shift in itself.
I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, 2 huge things came out of it with me leaving my job and this. But for me,
do you want to just talk a little bit about what you did before and what you've gone into, so that people know? Because some people won't know. A lot of people won't know.
So I was a sister in A&E, and I've worked in this hospital for 14 and a half years. I did all my nurse training there. I was a healthcare there. I worked in A&E, then I worked in ITU, then I went back to A&E, back to ITU. I just kind of like went back and forth between A&E and ITU, because in between I went traveling. And I was always very, I'll use the word sensitive, in my work. And I would get very attached to patients, their families. And in my earlier years, it was always, even when I was a student, like, nurses used to say to me, you're just soft. And, you know, some people, I'll never forget actually one nurse saying to me when I was a student, like, you need to harden up and you can't be like this. And I was just like, what? Because in my head, when I started, nurses were like, you know, lovely and bubbly and kind and emotional. And that is not always the case. So, yeah, then when I went to work on ITU, I just kind of like spiraled into this sadness that I didn't even really know was there. And I was very, very sad all the time, but I didn't realize. I used to cry all the time, but it was always like, oh, you're just soft. And I'd be like, yeah, I am. Even though you're just listening to what people are telling you. You're like, oh, okay. And I remember walking to my car one night and I just couldn't stop crying. I was like, why am I like this? Like, I don't want to be like this. And it was only when I started to, you know, delve further into this world of yoga and meditation and going within and doing some healing that I realized, actually, I'm not soft and I'm not sensitive. Like, what we see every day isn't normal life, but you normalize it because it's your job. And then it just got to a point where I just thought, I can't do this anymore, because it was making me physically sick. So I've had shingles 5 times in my lifetime of being a nurse. And every time I had it, the doctor would always be like, "Oh, are you stressed?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm not stressed. I'm fine." But obviously there was this internal stress from work, which you just lived in every single day, but you didn't realize you were stressed. And the
Yeah.
first time I actually realized I was stressed was when I came back from India, and I'd been in the Himalayan mountains for a month. And I was just, I can't even really describe what it was like. It was just this sense of calm that I'd never felt in my life before. And that was when I realized that, oh my God, like I live in this constant fight or flight every single day, and I don't even know it. And that's why, like, I was sick all the time, or feeling sick, and like
Yeah.
I'd thrush on my tongue all the time, when I'd get stressed. And it was only when I started to kind of like do the work that I realized that my job was making me sick.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because I mean, even you, I remember, I don't know, a couple of years ago, let's say, maybe, you were talking about how you'd feel emotional, but at the same time you were very numb to it all. And I think, like, people talking, saying to you that you're too sensitive or you're too soft for it, I think people are just so unaware of what they're putting their bodies through, and the trauma, and whether that's like small trauma or big trauma that they're taking on through being in this constant fight or flight mode. That, I mean, your body showed you, didn't it? It showed you over and over again, like, please, like, just wake up, listen to me. Why aren't you listening to me? And I think it's so important to make people aware of that, because we can just be in this constant flow of life that we just get so lost in it that we just forget to just stop and actually tune into our bodies and actually what's going on here.
You push
um
to the limit, don't you? And even though there are small little signs, you're always like, you just ignore them because you're like, oh, that's nothing. Oh, that's nothing. Until something happens where you actually can go into work. And then you're like, oh, okay.
yeah.
You start that cycle again where you're like, okay, like every time I had shingles, I never even paid attention. Like as soon as I could go back to work, I just went back to work and that was it. Like I didn't question anything. And it was only the second time that I then slipped my disc. And that then for me was like, I used to get this, well, I still get it now, but I started doing somatics the second time I slipped my disc, and I get this shaking, which is the trauma that is releasing from your body. And the first time it happened, I was like, what the hell is that? Because it looks like you're having a seizure, but you're not having a seizure. You're just,
Just
awake.
trauma release, yeah.
Um, and lovely April, who I do somatics with, was like, Sarah, this is like a trauma release. And I was like, what? And she was like, you've got PTSD from work. And I was like, no, I don't. I was literally like,
I remember that. I remember you telling me that. You were like, I don't have PTSD. I was like,
I was
maybe
like,
you do.
I was like, why would I have PTSD? Like I'm a nurse. Because at that point, I just associated it with like soldiers. That's all I associated with. And this went on for like a year. And every time I got this shaking, I was like, I feel like I'm going to cry. And she was like, you need to cry. And so eventually I would allow myself to cry and the shaking would stop.
Mm.
And I remember then going back to work. I had to be off for 3 months. And it was funny because when I slipped my disc and I went to the GP, he was like, okay, we'll have to sign you off because I pulled ligaments in my neck. And he was like, we'll start with 2 weeks. And I was like, no. I said, we'll just have a week and then I'll just see where I am. And he was looking at me and he was like, okay. And I was like, I'll be all right after 1 week. Because you have that like guilt about not being in work. Like you feel like you have to be there. And
So
then
many
obviously,
people have that. I used to have that so bad at work, because people think that you're taking the mick, or
or
I
that you're,
remember, I remember going in at, like, I don't know, you're off sick for a week and then you go in and they're like, all right, sick note, and it's just like
and you especially like the NHS is a health organization. We wouldn't feel guilty for being off
yeah, absolutely.
sick. And then like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I was like, what's happening? And it was actually getting worse. And I ended up being off for 3 months. And then I went back and I'd handed my notice in because I thought, right, I can't work anymore. And just randomly one day, I moved and I felt my disc move, and instantly I had that fear, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to happen again. And my body started shaking.
Mm.
and I couldn't stop it. So I went into the tea room, I lay down, and my legs were literally just like that. And I couldn't stop them from shaking. And then I was like, okay, like they'll just stop in a minute. And I stood up, and I remember I couldn't walk because my legs were shaking so much. And I was like, oh my God, like what the heck is happening? So I had to go home. So got me a wheelchair and wheeled me out of IT. And I was like, what on earth? And then one of the girls brought me home. And literally, as soon as I got home and I got in the bath, it stopped. And it was from then that I was like, okay, like that was a stress response. Like you cannot work in that environment. And
Yeah.
that was when I really started to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I feel our bodies do, is they'll keep warning us.
Yeah.
And it'll just get louder and louder and louder and give you shingles for like 5 times until you listen. And yeah, you wanted to quit your job for a while, didn't you? I remember you I mean, we've been...
Yes, to you. I quit then. Like I went to India. I quit ITU, and then I worked in A&E for like a month just on the bank before I went to India. And then I went to India, and I came back, and I was like, oh, I'll just do a few shifts in A&E. And then like I began to love my job again. And then they offered me a sister's post, and I said no. And then they offered me again, and they were like, think about it, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then eventually I was like, actually, yeah, I do want it. Because I was there anyway, so I might as well have just gone for it. And they said I could do 2 days a week, so it wouldn't interfere with my yoga. So it was great. Like it was a really good opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I still loved my job. I loved going in. Like I really enjoyed it. But then March hit, and I was just like, what the heck is this? And it just wasn't very nice. It wasn't very nice.
Yeah, of course.
We were in lockdown. You were like, oh, well, you might as well just be in work all the time because there's nothing else to do. But that really isn't the answer for anybody. That we still need days off. We still need to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said like we couldn't have our annual leave and all this stuff. And I just thought, what is happening? And then lo and behold, I got shingles again.
Yeah. And actually, it was more this year that last year, when lockdown happened, that things got really quite traumatic, didn't they? Obviously, because being a nurse during a pandemic is obviously going to be pretty traumatic.
Nice. Isn't nice?
Which no wonder you got shingles again. And I think that was a big driver for you, wasn't it? In terms of like wanting to change.
Because I was like, what? Right, I can't keep getting shingles. And this time was the worst time because I remember I was in work and then I got sent home. And the first week I was like, it's not, as bad as it was, because the fourth time I had it was quite bad.
Mm-hmm.
But this time I had it all on like my flank, around my tummy, and I normally get it on my eye. And I was like, I'm fine, feel okay. And then it got to like the second week and I still felt okay. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go back to work because I feel, a lot better than I normally feel with them. And my friend was living with me at the time and she was like, you're not going back to work. And I was like, I feel okay. And like, I really did. I remember we were in the garden and it was sunny and we were dancing. And I was like, oh, I feel great. Like I'm going to resume. And then 2 days later, I was so sick. And it was like, again, my body was like, you're not going back in there.
Yeah, please don't go. Please don't go back.
I just couldn't. I remember being on the couch and I was so sick and I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't drink anything. I had so much pain around my kidneys. And then it got to like 4 days later and I remember I was in the bath. And when I got out of the bath, I like fainted. I was lying on the floor and I was like, okay, it's okay. Just lie here for a minute. I can be fine. Like also typical nurse thing. Like, it's all right. You're all right. Get up and get on. So then I stood up and I just got to the door and thank God, like my friend was living with me. And then I was like, oh God, I can't go any further. I'm going to fall. And then she came out and she was like, Sarah, she was like, what the heck? So then I had to go to the GP and it was just all this, tests and this and that. And I ended up being off for 7 weeks. because I had so much pain, and it ended up that I had neuropathic pain from having shingles.
Mm.
So just because my nervous system was all over the
Completely
place.
shot. Yeah.
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 But that was just when I realized that I was like, you can't, like, you just can't do that. And actually, when I did go back to work, I stuck to, because I'd work 2 days and then the rest I'd work teaching yoga, and I just stuck to it because I'd always do like extra shifts. So I'd never just do my 2 days a week. I'd always do extra, because it was short staffed or it was busy, and like you want to help, like you don't want to
Yeah.
leave them like that. But when I went back, I was like, no, I was like, I'm not doing. And I think I might have done like maybe 3 in a few months of extra shifts, but after that I was like, no. And then it was, yeah, I think when I was doing spiral again, and then I felt really sick, and like my hair was coming out, and I had eczema on my eyes, and I was like, I can't, like, I can't do this any longer.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us about what's changed since you've done the spiral.
It's changed.
Everything. My whole life has changed.
It's changed. I am no longer a nurse. I am a full-time yoga teacher. And I love it. And I feel really grateful because, here we're in lockdown, and I'm still managing to like teach online classes and like go into some schools to teach the children of key workers, and then like do record sessions for kids in schools. So, although I'm not at my optimum before we went into lockdown again, I still have work, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because if this had happened in the first wave, if I was solely, a yoga teacher, then I would have panicked, because I would have been like, what am I going to do now? Because I wouldn't have done online because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah. You
But
would have.
yeah, probably, because it's always like, why don't you do online? I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. And I did one live in the last pandemic for Yoga Bears, and I remember doing it. And there's this bit where you like roll up in the mat because you're a cocoon coming into a butterfly, and I rolled out of the shot, and I was like, and I thought, oh, I'm not doing that.
But you're doing really well with your online classes now.
Really, I'm really lucky because the studio where I practice my yoga, Liverpool Yoga Studios, has become, since the day I stepped in there, my life started changing. And, some of my best friends work there, and we're just like a family. And I did my Yoga Bears teacher training with Estelle, who owns Liverpool Yoga Studios, and she lives in Spain. And then just from there, just everything has grown, and now they have like this new online platform, and it's amazing. And I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. And like Vicky, she's the general manager, and she's one of my, I just couldn't live without that woman because she's amazing. But she is always like, you can do this, you can do this, and she gives me so many opportunities because she believes in me, whereas I may have not like just gone for them because I was always a bit like, oh, I don't know, like if I can, because I used to compare myself all the time because my classes are like different, and but different is fine because people are different. And now we have this online platform, and like the day that we had a photo shoot, and like people were doing our hair and makeup, and I was like, how is this my life? How am I now doing this? Like I've gone from working in the hospital to thinking that's all that I would ever do because I loved my job, to my life completely changing. And now I'm teaching kids, I'm teaching adults, like Zoom classes, online platforms. It's mad.
Yay.
Yeah, it's madness.
And what else in terms of like how you relate to yourself? How's that changed?
Like the way I speak to myself.
Yeah, just the way that you feel about yourself and the way you relate to yourself. Yeah, how you speak to yourself.
I feel really good about myself. Like obviously there'll always be days where you're because it's not like every day I'm like, wow, I'm amazing.
Yeah, of course.
It's not going to be like that. There's always that, that inner critic. But yeah, I just noticed so many things about every day. I used to stand in the mirror and like look at myself and pick at myself, and now I barely even look in the mirror. Do you know, I don't care. And
Yeah.
it's so huge because a part of like my work with my adult classes and with women is that I want to like guide them and present them with the tools to empower themselves and to
Hmm.
say, yeah, like I am an amazing like warrior goddess. And like I have to believe that if I am guiding them, because if I don't believe it, then it's just empty words.
Mm.
So it doesn't mean anything because it's an energy exchange, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel so different about myself. And like I said to you the other day, like I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, I was like, I look so nice today.
You do.
And
You
that,
look nice every day.
you know, you never say that to yourself, but it's so
Yeah.
important to, because like we're amazing. We are amazing. And our exterior does not matter. It's what's in here.
Yeah.
That makes it.
100%.
So
Yay.
yeah, spiral change.
Celebrating you.
Yeah. And you, my darling.
Um, I don't feel like I've got any other questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I think I've shared a lot, actually.
You have, and I think it's going to be really insightful. Let me just have a look to see if anyone's commented. I don't know if anyone's watching live. I haven't actually been on Facebook to even look. But if anyone does have any questions,
I was going to be like, what?
yeah, if anyone has any questions, then please just comment below, either for me or Sarah. You might want to talk to Sarah, you might want to talk to me, and just hashtag replay just so I can see it. And that's it really.
And it
And
was
I'm going to, yeah, hopefully there's another girl that I took through the spiral who's looking at doing a call like this as well. So I think it's just really insightful for people to see
yeah,
where,
to see like where people have gone and like what people are doing now. And I really do think like the spiral's amazing and you are an amazing practitioner. And I'm not just saying that because you're my friend. I wouldn't have wanted to do it with anybody else because you're so supportive and you're there every step of the way. And you really have changed my life, darling.
mm,
Magic. Just like you.
you've changed your life. I've just supported you in changing your life.
Done it together.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, my darling.
Thank you, beautiful girl.
I
I
love
was
you
thinking,
lots. I'll talk to you in about 5 minutes, probably over voice note.
I love you too, darling. Bye bye.
Bye.